Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to get started with Bambu Studio slicing software. This is just a basic overview of the software so you can get printing as soon as possible. All right, so let's say, for example, you have a CAD file and you want to print it, like Fusion 360 here. Find the body here, all right? Right click, Save as Mesh. Make sure your units are in millimeter and select one of your mesh files here. I recommend STL or 3MF. And refinement high, go ahead and select OK. And I'm going to save it to the desktop here as part 2 and select save. All right, so once you've exported your mesh file from your CAD file, go ahead now and come back to Bambu Studio and select New Project. All right, so once that's done, the first tab you want to be in now is Prepare. The second thing to do now is to come on over here and select the Bambu Lab printer that you have. In our class, we have the Bambu Lab X1 Carbon, so select that if you're in my class. All right, and the next thing to do is to select your plate type, what you're printing on. So in this case, we're selecting the cool plate right here. All right, so um, select the cool plate. Now you may have a different plate. You may want to use the PEI or whatever, but in this case, for our class, we're going to go ahead and select the cool plate. All right, the next thing you want to do now is select your filament type. So let's say you're printing with PLA, which is what we do in our class. So you would select generic PLA or Bambu PLA, which is slightly different. All right, so in my class, you'll most likely select generic PLA or Bambu PLA. All right, so in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select generic PLA. And once you select the filament, it'll automatically update the settings here for you, which is pretty nice. So you don't have to go in and adjust them all. All right, and it's also worth noting that once you select the type of filament, you can adjust your temperature settings over here, because when you select the type of filament, it'll automatically generate the temperature settings profile. All right, so watch what happens if we say we change it to ABS. Okay, it's much hotter, the temperatures change. All right, and we're not printing with ABS, we're going to print with generic PLA. All right, and in my class, okay, this is what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and X out of here. All right, so the next thing you want to do now is to go ahead and add your mesh file, your STL file, your 3MF file, your OBJ file, or whatever it is. So let's go ahead and do that. I saved mine to my desktop, so I'm going to just drag mine over onto the build surface here. Conversely, if you don't like to drag and drop it, you can come on up here and you can go to File and you can go to Import, okay, or you can click here and find it here on your desktop, okay, as part 2. Okay, I want to hit cancel because I've already got mine loaded. So once your part here is on your build plate, the next thing you want to do now is to start moving it around so you have it in an optimal location. So if you press and hold your left mouse key, you can move your build plate around. And you always want to make sure that the object you're printing is in the center of your bed. You don't want it, well, let's go ahead and I'll show you how to move your object. If you click move, you never want to print it with it over here or in the corner, okay? Because the optimal location is pretty much right here in the center, okay? So another option that we can do is we can, well, rotate it. So we can rotate it like such. We can kind of move it like that. And notice it automatically pops it up and levels it. Okay, but you definitely want to make this 90 right here. Okay, not 90.1, so it's perfectly rotated at an even angle. Okay, and another thing that's very important is if you look at this right here, you can zoom in with your mouse wheel here. This has overhang. We don't want overhang. Okay, I mean you can, but you would have to add support. In this case, we don't need to add support. So if we do an edit undo, we can go back to our previous location. This is good. We don't have any overhang. All right. So the other thing that we can do is we can scale it, right? We can make it bigger and we can uncheck uniform scale if we want to just scale it in the X direction or Y or Z direction. But for the most part, you're always going to want to keep this checked. So we can make it twice as big by typing in 200. Okay. And we don't want it that big. So we're going to go back and just do an edit undo here. Okay. And then the other thing is here, you can always lay your face flat. So let's come over here back to rotate and let's kind of tilt that up. Let's now, if we click lay flat on face, we click that face and now it's flat on that face, which is something very handy. All right, so now we want to go ahead and start looking at our print settings here. And we can adjust these by clicking on these tabs here. So the first thing we're going to look at is quality. And what's nice about Bambu Studio, if you hover your mouse over it, it'll tell you what that is. So the first thing we're going to consider is layer height. All right, so 0.2 millimeters is typically sort of the general default value that works for most print settings. If you, when in doubt, just use 0.2. If you want something with very high detail, select something like 0.1. All right, well, for this part, it doesn't have a lot of detail. It's pretty basic. So I'm actually going to set it to 0.28, which will save on the printing time. All right, these other values over here, these are for more advanced print settings, so don't worry about them. Now let's come on over here and look at strength. All right, and for strength, we're basically looking at our wall thickness or wall loops. And we can adjust this number by making it higher. This will give us a thicker wall. And by making it lower, it'll do the exact opposite and give us a thinner wall. For more advanced settings, you can fool around with these top shell layers and whatnot, and if you just hover your mouse, it'll basically tell you what they are. But the next thing we're going to talk about now is infill density. Think of this as, well, how dense your part is. If we set this to 100, okay, it's going to print 100% plastic. And if we print it to 0, it's going to basically leave it hollow inside of our walls. Basically 20 to 30% is typically your default value for most print settings. All right, but if you want something that's stronger, you can set this to a higher value. Okay, and this will actually adjust here your infill pattern, which you can change. And it's good to know that some of these are more stronger than others. So once again, if you need something with more structural integrity, you would select or change these to a more stronger settings. But for now, the grid is fine. All right, so the next thing we want to consider now are supports. All right, and the way that our part or our object here is orientated, we don't need any supports. However, if we click here and we rotate it, like I showed you earlier, 90 degrees here, all right, and we type in 90 up there, hit enter, okay, now if we look at it, it needs supports here, right? There's a 90-degree overhang here. So what we're going to have to do now, if we want this to print successfully, is to come on over here, check Enable Support. I like tree supports. You can adjust the type of support. I think tree supports are the easiest to remove. All right. And you can also adjust the overhang angle. Like I said, this is a 90-degree overhang, so it'll add it in there because it meets the threshold angle here. So you can also check, I forgot to mention, build plate only. So it'll only add supports to the build plate. Okay, but we don't need that. So another option is to add a support or a wrap, which is basically a layer of plastic for your object to print on. And there are circumstances that call for this to be done. But in this case, we don't need it. So what I'm going to do is to show you how the supports here, I'm going to hit slice. All right, and in order for this part to print successfully here, you will notice that it printed supports here to basically, well, like the name implies, support this overhang here. All right. So ideally, you don't want to print with support. So I'm going to I'm going to take it out of preview here and check prepare and go back, and let's move it back to our optimal location by rotating it back to its previous location here. So I'm going to rotate it here like something like that. Okay. And it looks like we're good. So the last thing we want to consider now is others, and really most of these are very advanced print settings. The one thing you may want to add is a skirt, which is kind of like it just helps with bed adhesion. Okay, so I'll show you real quick. Let's go ahead and do outer brim only, and let's slice it, and you'll see here it'll add a few layers here. Now this is handy because it'll help with bed adhesion, so your part here doesn't warp. All right, so this helps with bed adhesion and it helps your print come out. However, when you're done, you're going to have to sort of scrape off these layers here, and it's not that hard. All right, so I'm going to come back to prepare here, and I'm just going to do no brim. Okay. All right, so once you have all your settings in here dialed, let's go ahead and preview it here. All right, and what that will show you now is you click over here, it'll literally show you how your part is going to be made layer by layer by layer. All right, and once everything looks good and you're 100% certain that this part is laying flat on your build plate, remember, if it's not, you can come up here and hit lay flat on the face. Okay, you can go ahead, you've sliced it. Okay, now you can click on this little arrow and select export plate slice file. Don't do all unless you want a video of it. Okay, so we don't want that. That's a big file. So you want to just select export plate slice file. Okay, and then click on there, and we'll come on down to the USB drive. Okay, put your name in the file and the object you are printing. So if you're in my class, I know who it is and what you're printing. All right, and then go ahead and hit save. Okay, and if you come back over here to the USB drive, you should see the G-code file here for Bambu Studio. All right, I'm going to go ahead and minimize that.
All right, so once it's saved to your thumb drive here, go ahead and unplug it. Let's come on over to our 3D printers. Okay, come on over here to the power switch. Go ahead and turn it on. Okay, so once you're here at the printer in the front here, come on over here, put your SD card in there, and you should hear a little click. Once it's done, okay, click on the file right here, and you'll see the object you want to print. Go ahead and select it and just touch it. And then when you're ready, just go ahead now and select print now. And it'll start printing. All right? And when you're done, it's important to come back a few minutes later and to check on your 3D print to make sure it looks right. That'll do it for this video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.